I sure did enjoy being with you guys last night. There was such rich, diverse conversation and sharing. I can't tell you how excited I get when we all bring our very diverse, different kinds of opinions together to build the collective intelligence or collective wisdom that having such different kinds of people with different perspectives can bring. You know, this change in assessment that we're kind of playing with during this learning cycle is critical because what we assess is really what we teach. A lot of people think you create the learning activities and the teaching and then you figure out a way to assess them. Really, it's the assessment, it's the standards, it's the college prep test, as some mentioned last night, that really determines what and how we teach. So we have to think about this idea about what needs to change or what needs to shift in our assessment practices. I didn't get a chance to finish what I had for you, so I thought that I would send you a video with some other ideas, see what you think of them, and then I hope that as things play out through this learning cycle, that this helps to inform or at least serve as a provocateur for some of the conversations that we have. So I did also want to say how impressed I was. One of the groups started to share a little bit about their project and what they had decided, and there were things in the implementation phase that they had already started doing. And I just want to encourage you to come start a blog post, maybe do a discussion post, sharing what you're learning along the way. You know, I love it. George Siemens said that when we are transparently sharing what we learn, we're in fact teaching. And the way that a true community of practice works is it's through co-created content, not what's done to us. That's exactly the kind of shift that we're talking about in your classrooms. Teaching is imposed upon people. It's done to people. It suggests I have this body of content and I want to shove it down your throat. And what we want to help you think about is how can you get the very things that you're interested in sharing with kids, the core content that you have to teach, and how can you make that a partnership? How can you transparently share what you've learned around this topic that you've got, that you're teaching, this genre of literature, this deep mathematical concept, these scientific constructs, the things that you're trying to help kids understand. How can you share transparently what you are learning or what you've learned, and then allow them to share back so that they feel that, you know, their opinions and what they've learned is at least a valid starting place. And then how do you assess all that? So I hope you'll take what you're doing with your projects, what you're learning along the way, maybe other things that aha moments that you've had in your own classrooms as you've gone through this year's professional learning, and bring it and post it as a discussion post in the community, because none of us is as smart as all of us, and that is really what we're talking about here. We're talking about being able to learn from each other and then make that be in the best interests of kids, because I don't want us to lose sight of what we're doing here is trying to do things that are in the best interest of children. You know, helping to mold and shape them. It's so much easier, even though I know in our struggles we talk about it, but it's so much easier to build children than to repair adults, and helping them to find their way and asking good questions and giving them the feedback they need. And so that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to go back to where we left off. Let me just scroll down a bit, where we were getting ready to talk about feedback. And I think that is an important place to begin. So where we left off last night was in this idea of effective formative assessment. And I'm making the push where summative assessment is a necessary, we got to have it. It's more holistic in the terms of high stakes testing or college entrance exams, which many of you tell me that's your whole game. You're preparing kids to get into the colleges of their choice. That's what parents expect you to do. College entrance exams are a summative assessment that are normed reference. They really are comparing groups of children to groups of children, groups of adult learners to groups of adult learners. They are not comparing kids' growth over time. That is formative assessment. And so formative assessment takes its it creates itself, it presents itself in lots of different ways, but basically in the way of feedback. You want to give kids feedback on their final product, feedback on the progress, and feedback on the process. So I'm struck by what Lori shared when Lori said, yeah, you've done these 3, now we got to talk about how you can get these 4 pieces. Feedback on the progress and helping them understand what lies ahead. Feedback on the process, the deep reflective learning. I think Jennifer talked about that, and some of the others of you I think Melissa talked a lot about that as well. Really thinking through the value of reflection in the process. And then that grade, the feedback on the product, let's talk about what you did and how it could be improved. And really seeing not so much this idea of student success, but really helping them to understand mastery, and that mastery is a journey that takes place over time, that mastery is something that you don't achieve in a week's time, in a month's time, in 9 months' time. Mastery is something that we revisit, and it's cyclic, and we grow. And that's why if you can tie into kids' passion, and then you can help them chase that because you've got them. So like I'm still grieving over what Andrew said about his kids come hating with baggage and hating the topic. So if you can find a particular genre of literature that they love, and then maybe bring in some of the classical pieces and compare it to the piece they love, and get them to work through the lens of what they love, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, to learn the curriculum that you have, then you're on the beginning of really of helping them to be motivated, to really think about what they need to do to come up with this great product at the end. And you have them. You really do. You have them. And it's the same way with you guys. I've struggled with trying to find your passion and tapping into things that are really of interest to you. And that if I can't do that, there's this disconnect. You got to find ground zero where everybody can get on the same ship and go, yeah, this is something I love. I want to talk about this. And so I hope that you will come in, you will post, you will ask questions, you will share, and we can move from there. Okay? And it's not too late. We've still got some months left. June 1st is a way off. And to be honest with you, this is a great place, because when you bring teams of educators together to learn, one of the things that happens is they go through these processes that first, we get together, we form, we're kind of cautious. Then what we do is we storm. And there's been some storming there, and there's supposed to be, where is this a value? This is a waste of time. Maybe this is okay, but I'm busy. You don't understand our situation. I want to learn this, sure. Oh, I already know all this. And so there's the storming piece that takes place. Or maybe even it was a storm within the team itself, or about the action learning project. And then you come out of that storming, usually about now, because you realize we're going to have to do this presentation, and especially if this presentation is going to be shared globally, we got to kind of come to some common norms. And so you go from storming to norming, where everybody says, okay, how are we going to implement this? And a lot of times that action research project, the action learning project, will allow you to come up with some common ground that you start to implement, and you begin to see, okay, yeah. And I hope some of you are having that experience. And then out of that norming will become performing. And that's where this just becomes business as usual, and you're on to the next great challenge that you're going to push back on, or disequilibrium causer. And so this is the time. Come share. Come teach us what you're learning. Let's start figuring out what it is that we're going to change collectively together, and what steps you're going to take, what investments you're going to make in becoming better at the art and craft of teaching and learning for yourself. Okay, so let's look at this feedback if we could. So feedback is really at the heartbeat of formative assessment, and feedback can take different it can accomplish different tasks. For instance, you've got task-oriented feedback, and that's basically saying specifically to the learner what it is that they're doing and how they're doing on the job. So I've found that a lot of times when teachers give feedback, they try to do it in the form of praise, and celebration is important, but I'm talking about task-oriented feedback. They'll say, good job, or way to go, or I love it, or thumbs up, or that kind of thing, and it's not specific enough. What I want you to do is think specifically, how am I going to truly blossom this child into helping them understand you're on the right track, and this is specifically what you're doing around that, and this is how well I see you doing. Talking about what's working, what they're doing well, and launching from there. There's also this idea of clarification, and that's where you get them to ask questions, and you talk about, you ask questions as well. You say, now tell me a little bit about this. What are you thinking here? How does that work? Unpack it a little bit more for me. And by doing that, for a lot of learners, sometimes just in talking it through, Andrew pointed to this last night, it's not so much pushback, it's that processing of what you're saying, and they really aren't even sure what, and I'm not suggesting this is Andrew, but for me, sometimes I'm not even really sure what I deeply believe yet in those unformed ideas and concepts until I talk it out, until I kind of discuss it with somebody else. And that's where learning really is social, right? And so in the online community, having 3 different schools' perspectives that really understand the basic niche of independent schools and private education, talking about things and kind of knocking them around with people who are like-minded yet very different in their approaches, can really help us develop the skill of clarification, looking at the process. Now, self-regulating, this is the goal, right? We want kids to be independent, self-regulated learners. And I've heard several of you say throughout the course of this experience, can't happen. These kids are immature. These kids aren't going to self-regulate. You don't understand these kids. Okay, so they're starting there, and what we want to do is help develop self-regulation skills in the immature learners that you have, if that's the case. So what you want to do is you get kids to start thinking about evaluating their own work. So when they're not assessing their own work, assessment usually is done, by someone else, or peer assessment, that kind of thing. But you can make self-evaluation. You can say to yourself, how do I self-evaluate in this? It goes along lines of Bloom's taxonomy, where you're moving up and you're really getting to the place that you create. And then in Maslow's, we interpret that as self-actualization. So self-regulating, self-actualization, and then I even want to move kids and adult learners to transcendence, which is some of Maslow's work that really isn't discussed very often. And then this feedback also can give appreciation. So it's specific praise that's linked to effective growth. So appreciative. So by saying I call it blossoming, but it's kind of like where I catch the kid doing something that's fantastic. And I say to them, I want to just tell you I want to look at this work right here, and I want to tell you what it means to me. What I'm seeing here, sorry for that phone call, but this idea of saying this what you've written here, this specific piece. Now, this is a great example of setting, and let me tell you how fantastic this is, because what you've done here, and you tell them exactly specifically what they've done, that kind of feedback. And what you've done here is you've done this, you've established this in the setting, and you've done this kind of thing. And what that tells me about you is that you've been listening in class, that you're working, you're applying the skills, whatever it is that it tells you about them. And then what I like to do is because I'm looking for growth, I like to pull that into the future. So I'll give specific praise that says, and this lets me know that you're the kind of student, you're the kind of learner that's always going to be listening for those fine-tuned sort of things that's going to establish you well into the future as a writer. I see the possibility of you as a writer really being, because of the work you've given this piece of setting here, really being able to establish the story straight out of the gate. So I hope you'll continue to develop those skills, because I look forward to the books that you're going to write in the future. So by using specific praise linked to growth, that feedback can really help a child become more self-actualized. So this formative feedback, sometimes teacher controlled, sometimes learner managed, sometimes with specific tasks, and sometimes really open, and using a combination of these is a great way to help kids learn and use formative assessment. So what is formative e-assessment? So we're going to take we've mostly been talking about assessment that could be generalized to both online settings or offline settings. You know, I love what this research piece says here. The contribution of more faster, more frequent, automated feedback to formative assessment. So the assessment really is just doing the same kinds of things, but by using different kinds of technology, we're able to uh, uh, do a lot more of the assessment, maybe even more deeply than we have in the past. All right. So this is good. So this idea of contingency is also an important one when we're thinking about assessment. The contingency piece is where you really are trying to think about how are we going to, excuse me just a minute. All right, I apologize for that. Had an important situation I had to take care of. Crazy out trying to record. But anyway, this idea of emergent sort of teaching or emergent sort of feedback. So I don't come in with feedback that's prescripted that I know I'm going to do. Instead, I listen to what the child says, I listen to what the adult learner says, and based on where they're taking it, then I give feedback that's very spontaneous, and it's really emergent or moment of contingency. So this is important for you to know your curriculum. You got to know it inside and out. You've got to own that learning before you can give it away. And remember, when we're talking about feedback or formative assessment, it's assessment for learning or assessment as learning. It actually becomes part of the learning process. So being able to capture moments of contingency and giving that emergent feedback as it develops based on the conversation with a specific student, and how you're going to take that off into the different areas of the curriculum you are trying to embed into the conversation and into the project they're working on is going to be critically important. So you can't just get by with a teacher's guide that's got it scripted or worksheets or read the chapter and answer the questions at the end. This is creating artistic dishes, if you will, that are that the ingredients are all about your curriculum and your objectives, but it's served up in a different way and cooked with a different recipe for each one of your students. And this is where the change in assessment, I think, is critical from what we have typically done, where it's kind of one size fits all sort of assessment. So really thinking about this idea of contingency. So we went over TPAC last time, and TPAC can be used really nicely for assessment. So let's say you're doing, you know, we presented it as a lesson plan model, and it can be used for that to show you how to create technology-infused lessons. But what if we use TPAC actually as an assessment model with your students? What if they're doing some type of project and you give them this to make it part of the learning process? So I say to them, okay, what is it you want to know or be able to do at the end of your project? You know, we're kids, we're working on the Civil War, whatever. And what is it you want to know or be able to do? And so then you let them start to think about, what is it we want to take out of this? Now, you, of course, are in the conversation with them so that as you're asking questions, you can also make suggestions like, these are 3 things I want to see. Now, what do you want to see? What is it that you want to learn from this? And you listen. You don't try to impose, you listen. Okay, but because it's a partnership, you get to put your ideas into that conversation with that student, as well as they get to tell you what's really important to them about the learning. Then what evidence are we going to collect to prove mastery? So this is really having the student think about, what is it you're going to create or do that's going to show me that you indeed did learn what you told me you wanted to learn, or what I suggested I needed you to learn? All right. And then what's the best way for you to learn? Are you an active learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you more auditory? Do you learn well in groups? Do you like to be social? Do you like to be out, you know, doing something with your hands? Do you like to think about it for a while first and then dive in? So really metacognating about their own learning style and being very reflective about that will help decide which kinds of technologies and tools they need to use. The last thing you want to do is have 30 PowerPoint presentations about their project at the end. That's not right. It's painful for you and it's one size fits all for them, excuse me. So, and then you also want to ask, how are you going to make your learning transparent? And this is the connected learning piece. You know, like what I would ask you is, you know, have you set your goals for what you're trying to accomplish to get out of connected learner experience? What are you going to going to create in this action learning project, and what are you going to produce that'll show that you actually have learned those things? What's the best way for you to learn? So how are you going to go about that? And then how are you going to make it transparent? Means, are you posting discussions? Are you blogging? Are you sharing with others, with us, about what you're learning? And so this is the same process you'll take with kids, that assessment becomes part of the learning process. Using the TPAC model, you can have them actually think about, okay, content knowledge is that first number one. What do you want to know and be able to do? And what pieces of content are we going to cover? Are you going to share with the other people? And then thinking about what is the best way to go about sharing that? And then is there a particular technology that will help you do that more seamlessly and help you do that in ways that'll make it easier for everybody else to understand? So let me see if I can go to the next slide here. My computer is doing some crazy things. Let me just see if I go down. All right, this is great. This is when you're thinking about Web 2.0 assessment, when you're going to use some technologies or tools to assess. The first thing you do is you clarify the learning intent. What is it I want these kids to know? Just like we were talking about a minute ago. Then you evaluate the media affordances. You ask yourself, is this the right tool for this particular learning task? It can't be the same tool for every single one, like Clickers or Kahoot or PowerPoint. Instead, you have to select the media or tool based on the affordances and how it aligns with the learner and the way they learn best, how it aligns with the artifact you're trying to create, and the goals of what you're trying to learn. So you align the assessment, which is this artifact they're creating, with the learning objectives. So you say to yourself, this is what I want them to learn and be able to do, and then does this artifact creation that was made with this particular technology do that? And so you really, as a teacher and getting as a partner in the learning with your students, you want to help them think about, are these two things aligning? And then what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate the tool based on, does this deepen the understanding? Does this deepen the learning? Does this transform the learning for the learner? So here's what it would look like if you were writing this out as standards. You can see that this is a particular one that we're looking at that talks about collaboration in the online environment. So we have this goal, and the goal here is we're looking for fundamental elements of effective online collaboration. The standard is aligned, in this case, with an ISTE standard. They used to be called NETs. It could be that you're going to align with another standard that you're using within your school, maybe some curriculum mapping or something like that. The outcomes are basically, how will I know, how will the learners know that they've achieved the outcome? So, I'm going to know because right here I'm going to I will have seen that they summarize the elements of effective online groups, that they describe their significance. And so I'm putting the pieces there that will help me know that they truly have mastered. And then the learning activities. So you can see on the far right, the evaluation assignment. If they do this evaluation assignment, it'll show me, it'll be an artifact that shows me that indeed they did learn. So here is a graphic organizer, one of the activities for that, where this particular learner is showing me that they indeed have learned and shown graphically what it is that I wanted them to learn. So it illustrates the relationship. So you make sure that your whatever the evaluation or the assessment activity, depending if you're evaluating or assessing, whatever that is, aligns with the objectives or the learning that you want to take place. I can do this as a child who's setting my own objectives, what I want to learn and how I'm going to assess this, as an adult learner, or you as the curriculum designer can do that. You also want to make sure, here's another example of trying to decide, how do I choose the Web 2.0 tools? So you could have them do a scenario or a role play using a particular tool that will help them to be able to replay that. So you give them a particular scenario and then you help them think that through. Also, when you're evaluating the tools affordances, I usually have the learners, when we're doing this kind of thing, talk about what problem does the tool solve. If they're using this particular tool, give me a justification, give me a rationale why this is the right tool for the task. And I love this. I don't know if you've seen it, but these are all different kinds of apps. So if we're going to Bloom's, and you can see Bloom's in the center there, and then you're looking for action verbs. So it's taken Bloom's, which starts, when we're remember and understand, and works its way up now to create, not evaluate, if you look at the new Bloom's. And then this gives you the different action verbs, the activities, and even some apps that'll help you with that. So take a look at this and go a little deeper. I've put the link there where you can explore it a little bit more. And when you're thinking about web-based formative assessment, there are principles that really deal with the formative assessment piece. So if you look at each of these are the principles. Like, are you giving them opportunities to learn collaboratively? Are you providing transparent rubrics that they've helped to co-design? Is there engagement in meaningful reflection activities? So by using these principles, it'll really help you in terms of making sure you're not using tools just for tools' sake, or like Nick Raponte said, using iPads or laptops strictly as delivery tools. So you have to think about, what does it look like? If I'm going to use these different kinds of tools, what is it that I'm getting at? It's not one size fits all. It's not like I'm going to have the kids blog. Instead, you have to figure out, what is it that I want them to learn and know and be able to do, and then will blogging be able to help accomplish that? This other idea that I wanted to share with you is, if you're an administrator, let's say that you're not an educator in the classroom and you're an administrator, and you're trying to think about, what do I look for when I walk through a classroom that's embedded in using different types of technologies for learning? And, can I tell the difference between chaos and future ready or 21st century learning? What's different? What's shifted? And so some of the things here are evidence in this excitement that's in there. Is it a humming kind of excitement? Maybe the comfort level of the teacher, is it too choppy? And as you look through these pieces, these are great guidelines for you to develop, so that even if you're not evaluating, if you're the one doing the teaching and learning, these are great benchmarks for you to be able to jump towards. See, the whole thing here that we've been talking about throughout every one of the learning cycles is change, isn't it? And change is here. Change is coming. You're not going to be relevant in the lives of your kids if you're not preparing them for what awaits them. Colleges are going through the same culture shift as our K through 12 environments. Standards are changing. People are writing new kinds of assessments. And so you guys, if you truly are going to be preparing these kids for what you tell me you're going to be preparing them for, are going to have to make peace with the fact that change is inevitable. If you tell me, I already know all this, we're already doing all this, we already got this, you don't understand who we are. I get it. I get it, because I feel that way about my own self sometimes. But the point is, blink your eyes and it's changed again. And so what we have to do is, just like in business, educators need to continually reinvent themselves, continually sharpen your skills. And yeah, it makes you tired, but this is part of growing yourself, self-actualizing yourself as an educator, so that you can own that and give that same self-actualization away to your students. And in doing that, we end up having kids that are amazing learners, who can solve problems critically, who can think deeply, who are not just doing the same things that the generation before them has done, but truly coming up with new innovations that leave the world a better place. So I hope you've gotten something out of the assessment conversation. I hope that this continuation video was helpful to you. And I'd love some feedback on it. So if somebody wants to start a discussion around that, please do. I'd love to know what you think about these ideas, and if you see any way that you could implement them. And again, one more time, I just want to encourage you, please go into the community and talk about things that are important to you. Start discussions, create a blog post, start to interact with people that aren't on your team, and ask questions about the work they're doing, and honor them. And I will see you online. Bye.